From the Hanging with Web Show TV's Bargain Basement Studio in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, it's Pillow Talk with Willow Schuyler.
Will you take me to Winnipeg?
I will, someday. Toronto, Montreal, Quebec, Winnipeg.
Now what's this guy doing up here in Manitoba?
He was holding the map up.
Every salvage mission that's been through this system has disappeared. Even those old pirates out at Winnipeg Drift say it's cursed.
Cursed. Winnipeg's got a great ballet. Have a good time, I swear to God.
Sweet guinea pig of Winnipeg! They've taken over our company!
Balderdash! I never agreed to that!
I should have stayed in Winnipeg, you know? I had a nice gallery, 3 paintings on the wall.
Are you kidding? And you look back. Born home, Quebec. Drafted out of the juniors in the 5th round to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Played for a year with the Leafs, then traded to the Winnipeg Jets, then to Calgary, then to Boston.
Wow.
So Winnipeg must get pretty cold up there.
That's it! Back to Winnipeg!
Hey everybody, welcome to Willow's Pillow Talk. I haven't been broadcasting. I haven't broadcasted in like 2 weeks. I've had other life experiences to deal with. So yeah. And speaking of life experiences, nobody knows more about life experiences than my big friend here, DJ. Man, you know, it's been probably a good almost 15 years since the last time we really chatted.
It's been a minute. It has been a hot minute, that is for sure.
I know BlogTV shut down and like we all just kind of went our separate ways. I'm still trying to keep track of everybody. What have you been up to?
Oh my God. God, where do I even start? In the last 10 to 12 years, I have lived, I feel like I've lived a lifetime. Before the show started, I kind of filled you in a little bit. The last, as BlogTV shut down, I was really kind of a downtime in my life. I was just going through a lot with work, a lot with family, and just a lot in my own head. And so I just kind of walked away from streaming and had to really kind of sort myself out. I actually ended up, went through this big mess at a place I was working, had a loss of not only income, but eventually the loss of the job and a home foreclosure. And then eventually, my marriage fell apart. So there was just a lot going on. And, long story short, I actually ended up living and working in New York. Well, I lived in New York City and worked kind of in Westchester for about a year. And it was just one of those things where I was out of work. And in my immediate area in Florida, no one was hiring. Like there was nothing. And so I started looking out of state. And at the suggestion of my then wife, she's like, maybe we need to start looking out of state. And we'd always talked about moving, out of Florida anyway. We had no love for staying here beyond my immediate family and her immediate family. So we were always open to moving anyway. And, I applied at Mass Eye and Ear in Boston. I applied with a doctor in New York, a group in Philadelphia, and then 2 places in the Carolinas. And I interviewed really well with all of them, but the guy in New York was the only one who was willing to fly me up and put me up overnight for a face-to-face interview. I mean, at the time I was unemployed, so there was no income. I'm like, I can't afford a plane ticket and a hotel room to go to Boston, to go to Philly and all this stuff. And they all wanted face-to-face interviews. And this was, in the days before Zoom and, stuff like that. So I was really kind of limited as to what I could do. This guy flew me up, put me up, and, after 10 minutes of interviewing with him, he met my asking price, and I had a job. So
wow.
So and New York was good to me. I enjoyed New York very much. And if at the time, what I thought was my marriage, because my marriage fell apart during this time, during the time that I was in New York. But if my kids hadn't been a factor, it's highly likely I might have stayed in New York.
Yeah. Was it like a culture shock moving from where you were to New York, or did you manage to fit in pretty well?
I managed to fit in pretty well. Most of my friends are New Yorkers. I have a lot of really close friends, and there's a joke about Florida that a lot of people jokingly say Florida is a chunk of Long Island that broke off and floated down, because there's a lot of New Yorkers and a lot of Long Islanders down here, and most of my friends, are a cross section of one of the 5 boroughs. So, that from a person standpoint and speaking their language and kind of knowing their energy, it wasn't a culture shock at all. The biggest culture shock, and even that I transitioned into, was the traffic. I had, coming from Florida, the biggest thing we get to metro traffic is Miami, Orlando, Jacksonville. So to go from rural Florida to New York City, you come out of work and you sit there and you're on a parking lot in the middle of a major road and nobody's going anywhere. So the first day it was kind of like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? Like, what the hell am I even doing here right now? And then after that, I was like, wait a minute, you know what it is, just breathe. And, and after that it was, thank God there was GPS though. Thank God I didn't go up there in the days before there was GPS, because I wouldn't have made it. Because my office wasn't in the city. It was in Westchester, which is outside of the city. And the one office was about an hour commute and the other one was about a 40-minute commute. So there's no way I would have made it.
Yeah. We're getting a couple of comments here. I don't know if you see it on the right-hand side where it says comments.
I do.
All right. So Donna, hi. Good to see you. Carl.
Welcome.
Ryan. Thank you very much. Favorite pro wrestlers. Okay, this is going to get interesting.
Oh, this is going to get fun. My God. Now, favorite pro wrestlers, are we meaning like current or all time?
I would like to know what your all-time favorite wrestler is.
All-time favorite, I would have to say Calgary's own Bret the Hitman Hart. It absolutely was, and in the 2 years that I spent in the wrestling business, he was absolutely somebody who I tried to pattern myself after, because I thought he was really very crisp in his movements, in his motions. But, certainly from because obviously it's a showmanship based product. So from a showmanship standpoint, I would definitely have to go with somebody like a Randy Savage or a Stone Cold Steve Austin, a Ric Flair, somebody who's a larger than life personality. Because for as good as Bret was in the ring, and he was amazing, he was an amazing technician, he wasn't that larger than life personality.
And when you were wrestling, like, who was the one that you looked up to while you were wrestling?
At that point in time, Bret Hart was still pretty big. So again, from an in-ring work, Bret Hart was the guy. From a reaching out and kind of grabbing that audience and trying to make them feel something, definitely Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, because these guys are just awesome storytellers and just amazing to take you on this ride. Pro wrestling is this ride that you take people on and you bring them up, you bring them down, and those guys did it better than just about anybody.
Yeah. So when you were wrestling, did you start off as a babyface and go into heel, or were you heel right off the hop?
I was heel right out of the gate, and I'll tell you this story a little bit. Actually, if you want, I can tell you how I even got into the business.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is actually kind of funny. There was me and a group of my friends. We all used to get together and watch the WWE and WCW, and back then it was still WWF at the time. But we used to watch all the pay-per-views, and one thing led to another, and the whole group of us ended up on the lawn just beating the crap out of each other. And that transitioned into this backyard wrestling federation. And we did that for probably about a year or so ago. Mind you, I'm like 24, 25 at the time, and we're all knuckleheads. And thank God nobody got hurt, because it wasn't one of us that knew what we were doing. So we're out there and we're doing our thing. And there was a local promotion called Coastal Championship Wrestling, and they put shows on locally. It was an indie promotion, and there was this guy, Sean, that we used to hang out with, that went to the show one night. And if there's anybody in the business who could have made it a certain degree, it would have been Sean, mostly because he was the biggest BS artist of all of us, and you have to be a certain amount of BS artists to survive in the pro wrestling industry. So he gets to the show and he watches the show, and at the end of the show, he manages to weasel his way backstage and meet some of the wrestlers. And he gave them, he's like, hey, I've got all my friends, we do this. Well, he gave them the impression that we were actually trained wrestlers. So they invite him down to, there was a training facility about an hour south of us. They invite him down and say, hey, bring your friends, come on down, and, let's see what you can do. So about a week or two later, I find myself in a car with about 4 or 5 other guys heading down to, a wrestling training facility. And we walk in the door, and this guy's name was Cliff Anderson, rest in peace. Cliff passed away about 2 years ago. But we walk in, and it takes him about 5 seconds to realize that somebody BS'd their way in there. And nobody knew what they were doing. So he sat us all down, and I won't repeat the language he used because it's
you go right ahead.
Okay, I didn't know what you allowed on your show. This is your show. I don't want to.
Hey, there's going to be an F-bomb somewhere along down the line. So.
All right, as long as you're okay with it, I don't want to cross that line.
I'm good with being the honest person, so I'm the reason why I will never be picked up for public television.
All right, that's probably why my podcast will never be anything more than what it is. So we get in there, and he looks around. He's like, all right, I'm going to tell y'all one thing. I know each and every one of you come from the fucking lawn. I'm going to tell you that if you want me to train you, you're going to stop wrestling on the fucking lawn. And that was pretty much the end of it. We had to make a decision. If he was going to train us, we were going to give up the lawn stuff. And we all did. Like, we walked away from it. He's like, all right, I'm going to teach you a couple things tonight. And he taught us a couple of things. And being a lifelong fan and thinking I knew what it was, getting in there and getting tossed around was a whole different experience. And that's the thing that you can't explain to people who don't watch it or who don't believe in it, because and I don't like to use the F word, the fake word, because it is and it isn't. It's like, I'm not going to tell you that I went home and I was sore for days. Yeah. Like, I woke up the next day questioning everything I ever thought. And that was, and I even was like, do I even really want to do this? Because at the time I was 150 pounds, a little bit of nothing. But I went back and, we trained and we trained and we trained. And then as we got more comfortable with what we were doing, Cliff started as I'm not even going there. But with Cliff, he was running his own shows. He didn't just train, he ran his own shows. And originally, and I don't know how familiar you are with wrestling history, I had much more hair back then, and it was kind of shoulder length. And I guess to a certain degree, I resembled Andy Kaufman. And if you're familiar with Andy Kaufman and everything with Jerry the King Lawler and that whole feud they had. So Cliff had this wonderful idea. He's like, all right, DJ, here's what you're going to do. You're going to be Randy Kaufman. I'm like, who? And to my embarrassment, I had no clue who Andy Kaufman was. Like, I had to ask one of the guys. I'm like, who's Andy Kaufman? And they're looking at me like, how did you get in this school and you don't even know who Andy Kaufman is? Like, this is a major feud from like the 70s and 80s with Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler, and my dumb ass had no clue. So, like, even like I was born in the 80s, and even I knew who he was right from like my mom talking about him and all his like little shenanigans and right. But I knew who Jerry Lawler was, obviously, but Andy Kaufman, I didn't watch Taxi, and I didn't know a whole lot about him. So they give me this thing, and basically I'm Randy Kaufman. I'm Andy Kaufman's unknown brother, and I'm going to basically tour around Florida, not only cutting promos in the ring that Jerry Lawler that he'll never hear, because he was working with WWE at the time, and he was never going to hear about some 150-year-old or 150-pound punk kid in Florida, calling him out. And then I was going to walk around and with an intergender championship, challenging women wrestlers to matches, because that was Andy Kaufman's thing. He wrestled the women on the circuit, and that was going to be my thing. And thank God that died a quick death, because the next idea he came up with was for my friend Eddie, and Eddie and I were the only two that really stuck it out. Everybody else kind of dropped off within a couple of weeks, within a couple of months. And so Eddie, he had this gimmick for Eddie that just wasn't going to work. And finally he's like, Eddie, I came up with an idea for you. I was sitting on the toilet because I do my best work when I'm taking a shit. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to be Fast Eddie, the pizza delivery guy. Now, the comedy in that is that's what Eddie was doing for a job at the time. He was a pizza delivery guy. He's like, you're going to come out here with a pizza bag and the whole thing, and that's going to be your gimmick. And Eddie's like, okay. And he's like, DJ, you're going to be his manager. Your name's going to be Guido. Guido. Oh, no. Oh yeah. We went full cultural appropriation on this. It was great. So that was really kind of how it all started. And we were heels. And we were heels for several months before I actually started to get in the ring and work. And that's when we had this big blow up with me and Eddie. And my first official match was me wrestling Eddie.
Okay. And what was your move? What?
I never named it. It's difficult to kind of describe. I guess you got somebody you've set them up for a DDT, and then you kind of reach over, you hook them by the waistband, you lift them up, and you just pancake them flat down on their face. And that was my finisher. Like I said, I never named it because I kind of got out of the business probably about 6. I was in a total of 2 years. I probably got out about a year after I really started to get my stride and work shows on a more regular basis, because it was one of those things back in 1997, 98, 150-pound guy had a ceiling, and that ceiling was manager. That was it. Yeah. And I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be in the ring, and there was no way in hell he was going to he would put me in the ring with the smaller guys, but there weren't a lot of smaller guys back then. You know, your average wrestler now, I mean, you've got some big guys in there now, but a lot of your more active competitors hover around that 200 to 220 pound mark. And I'm running probably about 180 now, but back then 150 pounds, you were a manager, and that was it. And there's a ceiling, and there's a ceiling for the paycheck for a manager. And I needed to make a living. The career that I'm currently in fell in my lap, and I kind of went pro wrestling, the career won out, and I kind of fell out after that.
And did you sustain any injuries in your time of wrestling at all?
Mercifully, not a one.
Wow. That's very fortunate. That's lucky.
Yeah, Cliff was a good trainer. He taught us safety, and he taught us, how to get in there and, not kill yourself, not kill your partner and things like that. So it was, like I said, it was some of it was luck, some of it was training, because even the best trained can get injured.
All right, so a couple more shout outs. Hi, Terry. How's it going? A friend from Ireland. Kyle, how you doing? Yeah, I'm doing good. Good. Hey, Dan. Long time no see. It was like yesterday. Carl, yeah. I'm as I keep saying to people, I'm the social media socialite, so I'm everywhere. So yeah, very lucky. Yes. So with your new job now, how do you like your career, by the way?
I like it very much. It's healthcare is interesting here in the States. Obviously, we're probably there's the perception of United States healthcare, and then there's the reality of it. What I get to do, I get to help people. And it's and I get paid. Obviously, I get paid. I don't do it for free. I'm not walking into not get paid. But it's been almost 22 years of helping people either save their eyesight or see better, and that's been personally rewarding. There's been some professional ups and downs. Like I said at the start of the show, we did have a situation at a job that I really thought was a place I was going to hang my hat until I retired. I was being paid very well, and the amount of work I was doing versus what I was getting paid, I was overpaid. Yeah. And that was only by design, because they really were, to what I'm used to, they were overstaffed. So the workload was nothing compared to what I was used to. So I thought it was a job I was going to stay at forever. And then the founding partner who started the practice got greedy, defrauded his partners, and there was a huge lawsuit. And people took sides. 3 doctors went one way, 3 doctors went another way, and then people below them had loyalties, and those loyalties spilled over into the clinic. It got pretty ugly. There were people literally about to throw hands in the hallway of a medical practice.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it was ugly. Like there was like 3 solid years of ugly before this finally settled down, and 3 of the partners left, and then the 3 that actually sued them stayed in the building and everything. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that in, I've been working some type of job since I was 15 years old, and I'm going to be 50 in 2 years. So I've never seen anything that hostile in my life.
Yeah.
But,
and I didn't think that if that was possible for the kind of stuff that you do.
Oh, it is. And I didn't either. I mean, I work in eyes. We do cataract surgery, glaucoma surgery, retina surgery, injections in the eye, things like that. And to me, it's a job. It's a job. You come, you do it to the best of your ability and training, and you get paid, to do that job. And if you give a damn enough about it, you do a good job at it. And to me, that's what I did. I went in there and put in my 40, sometimes 50 hours a week, and did the best that I was trained to do and that I personally believe I should be doing. And then all hell broke loose. And there were days where I would go home, I would look at my, my then wife. I was like, honey, I don't even know what to say about what's going on in this place right now. It's chaos.
Yeah. Terry, I cannot believe that you are still up at 1:30 in the morning. I'm usually dead by the time 10 o'clock rolls around. No worries, Dan. Good that you get to hang out with us a little bit longer before the publisher wants you to do your job. But yeah, no. But you've always been a fit guy, right? So it's
fairly fit. I've stayed pretty active. It's had its ups and downs. Like I was telling you earlier, I went through a pretty bad depression back about 10, 11 years ago. The tail end, it was right after I lost my house, and that was I think that was the tail end of 2010 into 2011, and I just went to pot. Like I really did. I wasn't eating well. I was drinking a hell of a lot more than I should have, and I just couldn't get out of it. And it took me, when I moved to New York City, and I didn't realize at the time my marriage was part of the toxicity. Mm-hmm. And we had our kids, we had the twins, and there was a lot going on with the kids at the time too that really was not helping. And to be fair to them, I wasn't handling it as healthy as I should have been. And when I moved to New York, and my ex-wife now decided not to follow me up there, because originally the plan was I was going to go up, find like a room to rent and stow away money for about 6 months, and then move the rest of the family up there. Mm-hmm. And about a month in, she decided, no, that's not going to work for me, and she decided to stay down there. And it was at that point where I had removed myself from the toxicity and kind of peeled away the cobwebs, and I was able to look at things a little more. And that's when I really started taking better care of myself, exercising again. And, I'm mostly consistent with it. So I'm getting older. I do have some nagging aches and pains here and there that limit what I do. But, it's for almost 48 years old, I do okay.
Well, do you have a home gym, or do you prefer going out to an actual gym and working out?
I have things here at home that I can do. I prefer the gym. I prefer the weights. I like lifting. I'm not like some big, bulky meathead. I just like the physical motion of lifting. And while I was in New York, that lifting became therapeutic. It was more here than here. It was mostly about getting my brain back to center and getting my energy back to center. So I like that. It's cathartic.
Yeah.
The lifting is cathartic, and it's not even so much about bodybuilding or putting on muscle. It's about just kind of focusing on putting my energy into something. And I can't get that from the home, because there's just no room for the type of equipment that I like to use.
And speaking of BlogTV, E-Prime just made an appearance in the chat and using my real name. So, yeah. Hi.
There are so many people from that BlogTV time period that I didn't know everyone. I knew a few people, but I was sitting there before I even came on here earlier tonight. I was trying to go through the mental Rolodex of people that I actually remembered from BlogTV, and I remember faces and I remember shows. I do not remember names at all.
I keep in contact with quite a few people from Blog. Heidi Gordon was like Hidden Ninja for the longest time, and then Gar the Ghoul. He became pretty well known, and yeah, it was just like I had like several different groups that I hung out with. I had like the morning crew, who was like Dr. Rob and Roller would do like their shows, and then I would. It was like you had different people throughout the day who you would hang out with.
Yeah. So yeah, I missed the morning. Like occasionally, if I had like a morning off, I would jump in on and just kind of watch Dr. Rob. And to answer your question, I was Tats Deej, and probably anybody would remember. I was lucky if I had a dozen or two viewers like regularly.
I think I met you through Boxhead.
Possibly.
Maybe.
Possibly.
So,
I'm trying to remember where you and I met. I don't know whether you and I met on Blog or we met on YouTube.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it was YouTube.
I think it was. I think we actually found each other's videos on YouTube because being part of that vlogger community, and for me, definitely like a lower tier vlogger.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people in that atmosphere, and I think that's where we met.
Yeah, like I remember being like, you had a couple of challenges that you did, like the 100 push-up challenge, and I think you challenged me to do like some Tabasco drinking.
I think it was cinnamon. It was cinnamon. Everybody was doing. They had a tablespoon of cinnamon, and you had to try and swallow it, which was hideous. What a terrible idea! It was like the Tide Pods of the day.
Yeah. You know what? I honestly, E-Prime, my brain, like, it's been so long since we've done anything on Blog. I don't remember a whole lot of people right now. Like, I think I remember James, but yeah, rest in peace, Roller. I know he passed away a couple of years ago. But yeah, no, there was one guy that I would talk to a lot on Blog, and his name was Jimbo, and he actually helped me, set up my page at one point. So
I vaguely remember Jimbo. I think I remember Jimbo. I think he may have jumped in and out on my show a couple times too.
Yeah, hey, dude, you missed. You need to go back after the show and watch my intro. I think you'll enjoy it. But yeah, no, the YouTube community. I haven't really grown much on YouTube. But if there's anybody on YouTube that's willing to collaborate, I'm always for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I have been on such an up and down with YouTube. I YouTubed heavily when I was in New York, just because, again, it was catharsis. Just there's a bunch of stuff in here, and I need to get it out. And it was so I did a lot then. But I look back at a lot of my early YouTube stuff, and a lot of it came during that time of depression, and a lot of it wasn't very good. Like, I've gone back in recent years and deleted so much stuff because I've looked at it. I'm like, one, it was either terrible. Two, I'm not that guy anymore. Or three, it's just one of those things where you realize after the fact, just because we have these forums where we can get up and say things doesn't always mean we should.
Exactly. And
I was always proud of the fact that I've got no filter. Well, sometimes you need to have a filter because you go out there and you say some dumbass stuff. And I definitely have said some dumbass stuff in the nearly 15 years that I've been on YouTube. And, a lot of that, thankfully, there's probably something stupid that I've said that somebody has saved in their hard drive. And will, if I ever become even remotely famous, it'll find its way to the surface again. But definitely, I look at it now and I'm like, I would never do some of the stuff like that again.
See, I know a lot of people like the fact that they can post their opinions on the internet and be edgy, but I've always been the type of person to learn. If I have a strong opinion about something, that's not always going to be what I stand for in the next 5 years or 5 minutes. I'm always learning. If I screw up something, I'm willing to learn from my mistakes. So I don't know. Just I don't like the whole edgy attitude of some people on the internet.
Oh, and that was what I tried to be. And it really was awful. Like, and not to say that some of the opinions that I had, I don't still have, but there's a better way to deliver those things, and not so aggressively, and definitely not in such a toxic way. And some of that was just me venting frustrations that I had in life.
Yeah.
In life, in my career, in my family, and it bubbled to the surface, and it came out in my YouTube videos. So I really took, a break from YouTube. And I've done a couple of videos over the last couple of years. I tried my hand at some skits and video editing just to play around. But, these days I lean more towards the podcasting.
Yeah. And your podcasting, how long have you been doing your show, by the way?
Let's see. I think I did my first introductory episode in July of 2020. So I'm coming up on a year.
Okay. Yeah, it's been like, while everything shut down here, I needed to figure out something, like pick up a hobby, just to pass the time. And what better way was it to, hey, let's go back on blogging?
Yeah. It's the podcasting has been such an interesting outlet for me, because I obviously it's a very low budget podcast. I don't have a whole lot of equipment, and I never expect to feed my family and all my ability to podcast and grow an audience. But it's exactly that. It's a hobby, and it's something that I enjoy doing. I have met up with two really good guys, and we sit on my podcast and we talk pro wrestling. And it's a blast. We enjoy the hell out of it.
And it's funny that I'm talking to you right now about your wrestling and all that. For the last year, I've been a co-host on Reels and Heels. It's a wrestling and pop culture thing.
Really?
I don't know why I need to have you on the show, dude. I think that my hosts will actually enjoy having talking to an actual wrestler. And
I'm absolutely open. You just gotta let me know when, and I can set it up. I'll have to. Thank God the woman I'm with now, she has been such a blessing. She puts up with this bullshit. Like we record on Wednesday nights, and I tell her, I'm like, look, it's Wednesday night, 7:30. Me and the guys, this is the only time we can get together. She's like, okay. And then of course I don't go live. I because I just don't have the capacity to go live. So it's all pre-recorded. So then, somewhere over Thursday and Friday, I've got to edit it. And that takes a little bit of time. So she's been just amazing for me with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of wrestling, Kevin, good to see you, bud. Kevin used to be a wrestler as well. So
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have yet to interview him and find out all his stuff. So, but he's part of our Hanging with Web team. He has a show called The Main Event.
Oh, very cool.
So yeah, him and his wife do a pretty good talk show. So I try to tune in as much as possible. But yeah, I know Ryan had a question up here earlier. Yeah. Favorite movies or TV series? What are you watching right now?
TV series. What am I watching? It's interesting with me in TV. I'm not somebody who binge watches anything. I'll watch 3 or 4 episodes and then walk away for a month or 3. So let's see. I just finished up WandaVision, which started off a little shaky but ended amazing. I currently went back into watching the Star Wars Clone Wars series. Actually, I picked up a couple episodes of that last night. I'd say the biggest thing that I've been roped into lately, I don't know how familiar with anime you are, but there's one on Netflix. I'm going to show my ignorance here because I'm not an anime expert at all, so don't clown me.
No worries.
There's a series of animes called Fate, and it's, I guess, told in different chapters. And so I started picking those up. And then the first one I watched was absolutely amazing. The second one's kind of reeling me in, but it kind of follows the children of the people from the first one. And then movies, anything superhero related. I'm a geek. I'm a massive geek. I'm just,
kind of obvious. And then of course there's like me with the Slave Leia T-shirt.
There you go. Yeah. I got deep into the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. I fell down that rabbit hole and then got involved in that whole movement. And actually my friend Rob and I did 2 pretty good episodes on my podcast, just kind of talking about that whole timeline of events and how that came to be a thing. I'd say of any movie that I've seen recently, that one's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
Recently.
Like I like them all. I like all the superhero movies. I really enjoyed the Avengers and where the Marvel universe went from there. I don't know, just the TV shows not so much. I couldn't really get too involved in a lot of the TV shows, but I'm just all the movies it was like opening up a comic book and seeing all my favorite characters come to life. It was just amazing.
It allows you to unplug from the world and be a kid again. And I think people really lose sight of that sometimes. It's okay to believe. I firmly believe that it's okay to pull yourself out of the real world for a little bit. I think this is why, even at almost 50 years old, obviously people are going to say, "Oh, you still watch pro wrestling?" This is why. I know what it is. I was part of what it is. I don't care.
It was the closest thing to superheroes that we got.
That was it. That was the closest thing to real life superheroes was pro wrestlers. And I give a damn about what it is. I just want to shut this off and be entertained for 2 to 3 hours, and that's okay. It's okay to play along.
And it's a great escape.
Absolutely.
I remember like growing up and watching wrestling for the first time as a kid in my first foster home, and I'm just like, what is this? What? I get to watch people throw each other down and jump all over the place and do all these spectacular stunts, and they're practically naked. Why not?
Sign me up. That sounds like a good time.
So, I mean, it was around the time where Hulk Hogan was big and the Macho Man, and at one point I had it set in my mind. I'm like, I'm going to become a wrestler. I'm going to walk down the aisle with these guys.
I never made it to that level, but there's definitely a cool factor to that first time. Like, it's terrifying. Like, it's absolutely terrifying because the first thing in your head is don't screw up, because you screw up and they never forget it. Like, they just never forget it. And in my first match, we screwed up. So, but there's something so cool about just doing it. Like, I trained for this. I got out here. I did it. And I didn't completely suck. And from there, the problem with it is it becomes a drug. And, my friend who I did it with, Eddie, he was beat all to hell. Like, there was one point in time, him and his girlfriend, they lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment complex. And she's like, I had to practically carry him up the stairs. Like, he was so beat up, his knees, his neck, and everything. Yeah. And he would drag himself out of bed and go the next day. Because it gets in your head, and it's actually, if you don't govern yourself, it can be very very toxic.
Kevin used to impersonate Stone Cold, and like, if you see him, you'd understand. Like, he does a great job on his show doing it. Hanging with Webb. Thanks, Harry, for the plug. Yeah. Sorry, everybody's like talking amongst themselves too. So.
No, that's okay. You and I are just talking, and everybody's kind of going along.
You know what? That experience. How was that experience for you when you came out in your theme music is playing and you have the crowd jumping. Like, how was what was that experience like for you?
It's incredibly cool. It's cool, but at the same time, it's frightening. And for me, it was kind of bittersweet because, like I said, there are people in the industry who look at it very differently. And there are a lot of people that are very bitter about the fact that they never got the big break to go to WWF or WWE or WCW. And so they're still working the indies. And so there's a chip on their shoulder. Eddie and I were doing a thing. And for what I lacked in certain areas, I was really good on the mic. Like I could talk. Like they'd give me like a basic, okay, this is what we want you to do. I would throw in my own thing. And every single time it got over. Like, so we were heels. So we got booed out of the building, like every single time. And it was amazing. Like it was an amazing feeling to know that 200, 300 people are just like booing me, like all the way out of the building. So we did this thing. It was the night that I turned babyface, and I had gotten to the place, and the show was getting ready to start. And it was supposed to be me and Eddie were supposed to work this guy from Tampa. And he was Dean Malenko had a school over in Tampa, and he would send guys over to work our shows. And the guy from Malenko's didn't show. So Cliff was trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? He's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Eddie, you're going to go out in the ring and you're going to cut a promo on Guido. You're going to chew him out because you're always losing your matches and you're blaming it on him. So he does the thing. I come out to the ring. We have the match. And we really were, I won't say we had the best match of the night because we did not have the best professional wrestling match that night. But we got the biggest crowd reaction because the gimmick that we were doing and what we were doing in that particular area got over. And so they were the crowd that night was really invested in it. So even though the match was the shits, I shouldn't say it was the shits. It just obviously it was a very basic thing. And we screwed up a spot in the ring, but we covered it pretty well. But by the time we got to the finish, we blew the roof off the place. And actually, I may have that video on my YouTube channel, and I can probably share it with you at some point.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's on there. I think it's on my YouTube channel. I'll share it with you later.
Okay.
But we did the thing, finished up the match, and I went to the back. And mind you, I'm 6 months in the business tops. This is like my first actual show as a wrestler. I've done the managing thing for a couple of months. This is my first actual wrestling match. I get back to the back, and there's this dude. He was the Black Nature Boy, and he was basically this black dude. He was running this Ric Flair type gimmick, and he'd been in the business a good 8 to 10 years. He was a good-looking guy, fantastic shape, wonderful with the ladies. Just he was a wrestler. He was, when you think wrestler, this dude was it, and he was amazing. Well, when you go back, there's like this upstairs little like spiral staircase. He comes hauling ass down the spiral staircase. And he's like, man, I came down here to see what they were popping for. He's like, oh, it was you. And I was like, ah, shit. I was like, that is not the answer that I wanted. You know, I wanted somebody to say, hey, you did a great job. And I got, oh, it was you, the new guy. And it was about that point that I was like, okay, maybe I need to rethink this. And I stuck it out for quite a while longer. But it was just in that moment, I was like, wow, that's how this is going to go, huh?
So what was your theme song?
Believe it or not, it was some stereotypical Italian I didn't even get to pick it. Like they put because we had Eddie's theme music. I think was "Brain Stew" by Green Day.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it was "Brain Stew" by Green Day. So as a manager wrestler thing, I always came down to his music. On that night, they just threw some shit on the CD player and blew it out over the loudspeakers. And I'm like, oh, guess that's my music. And we were off to the races with some Godfather-esque, some orchestrated music. Like I don't even know the piece. It's been like we're going back like 20 some odd years ago now.
Oh wow.
Yes, Guido. Guido. I was the manager of the pizza delivery guy.
Promo skills are always a plus. Yeah, like I've been to quite a few live wrestling shows for like the local wrestlers that I'm friends with, and they are just spectacular. Even though it seems like in some ways that they're some of the characters are trying too hard to be like flashy and have like their typical nonsense, but it just with a couple of my friends like Adam Knight, and like meeting him beforehand, knowing that he was a heel, and then watching him and just like day and night, like I was not expecting him to be a heel.
Yeah. Being a heel is fun because you get to play. I enjoyed being a heel more than I ever did being a babyface. I thought it was a lot easier. But again, there is that line you ride. We did something one night where we had a guest. She was a local DJ for a country radio station. And they pulled me aside. Yeah, we got this girl coming here. We want to put her over. We're going to do this thing with you and Fast Eddie. And you're going to come down and you're going to cut a promo on her. And he's like, I don't know, just say some stuff about her. I'm like, mind you, again, I've been in the business for about 3 or 4 months here. And I'm like, okay, you guys are giving me free reign to say what I want. You guys are braver than I thought. So this poor little girl, I pulled her aside. I said, look, here's what I'm going to say. Okay. I was like, and please, and I had to like preface everything. I'm like, please don't take anything that I'm going to say to you in that ring personally, because I'm going to be nasty.
It's just a character.
It's just a character. And God, she was such a champ. I went out there and she was like the guest ring announcer. She's getting ready to announce Eddie. And as she's getting ready to say, I swiped the mic out of her hand. I said, you stand over there, you skinny, ugly wench. There's no way that some broad from some redneck radio station is going to introduce my wrestler. Stand over there next to the fat guy and shut up. And so we did the thing, we did the match, and there's a couple times during the match where I'm getting in her face, and then there's one spot where the guy we were wrestling, this guy, Pat McGuire, I pull him out of, like, he hits Eddie with his finisher, he goes to pin him, I grab his boots, I pull him out of the ring, and all of a sudden, he's like a foot taller than me. So all of a sudden, I'm like, what the fuck am I going to do? This guy says he's going to beat my ass. So, I'm selling it, I'm doing my thing. Well, he grabs me, he turns me around, and we'd already set this up beforehand. She slaps the shit out of me.
Nice.
And we blew the roof off the place. It was amazing. It was so much fun. It really was. To put her over like that and to get that reaction from the crowd was just, to me, I did better work in the ring. That match was the most fun I had in the 2 years that I did it, mainly because I got to interact. I did more with interacting with the crowd. I'd gotten comfortable with that. I'd interacted with this girl. Everything fired on all cylinders that night.
Going from babyface to heel was impossible for me to pull off. The crowd would not hate, no matter what I did, even give me a woman wrestler. Man.
Kevin, when did you wrestle? Don't know what kind of lag there is. That might take
Kevin, if you want to join the conversation, by all means, I'd love to have you on.
I could definitely see, especially if he's wrestled in the last 10 to 15 years, it is very hard for a true heel to get over. I take like what WWE has tried to do with Kevin Owens. Like at this point, Kevin Owens is probably going to be a lifelong babyface because even when he's trying to be a heel, that crowd is behind him 100%. And there are just some people and some things that you do, you're always going to be a babyface no matter how hard you try. Some of that is the environment. So 2002, so that's about right. Yeah, 2000. I honestly, as much as I love Stone Cold Steve Austin and for as awesome as he was and everything great that he did, I blame Stone Cold Steve Austin for people not being able to be a heel anymore because that was just such an anomaly. For him to go from being such a heel asshole to being literally the hottest thing to ever come out of pro wrestling in the last 25 years, it really kind of ruined the trajectory for a lot of other people coming forward because it is hard to get that heel persona over in a way that people believe.
Yeah. But he does it with so much pizzazz. You want to hate him, but you also love him at the same time because it's almost like he's a heel with morals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's like the ultimate anti-hero.
Oh yeah, the gun on Vince was that was a great skit. That was a great bit in the ring.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Just I loved the Undertaker. I loved Shawn Michaels. I loved them all. But of all the heels, I think Stone Cold is the best one of them all.
Well, and that comes down to, and this is something that is so hard. And again, as we talked a little bit earlier, wrestling Twitter and modern wrestling fans, somewhere the paradigm shifted, and people are more interested in the actual moves. And I'll be fair, you should look like you know what you're doing, and you should be able to perform those moves, one, convincingly, two, safely. But at the same time, it's what happens in between the moves that makes the match and makes the segment and makes it all work. And I use Randy Orton as the crowning example of modern wrestling and what it could be and what it should be. Now, I will preface this by saying Randy Orton is not even in my top 10 favorite wrestlers, but you'll never hear me say a bad word about him because the guy is absolutely amazing at character work. And there's so many people, their character is, hey, I'm a great wrestler guy and I do the moves real good. And I'm like, well, okay, what's next? You know, what do you have after the moves? And if you've got no character, you're not gonna make me watch. I've always been invested in characters, like you said, Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, these larger than life comic book heroes. And if you haven't got that, it's going to be very hard for me to invest in that character.
Yeah. Nothing beats a bedpan.
Oh, the bedpan. That should be enshrined.
Like, that is incredible how they can intertwine almost like their real life situation with their characters. Like,
yeah. Well, basically, there's a saying in the wrestling industry: the best characters are you cranked up to 11. And I firmly believe that. You know, Stone Cold Steve Austin was an extension of that guy's personality, just with the volume all the way up. You're seeing that now with Roman Reigns, who's doing, the best work of his career as a character. It's just him dialed up to 11.
Yeah. And what you said, there's going to be toxicity in almost everything. Like, if fandom is full of toxic people, and wrestling it falls along with the fandom. Like, hey, people will say constantly that wrestling does not belong at Comic-Con. I'm sorry, it does. Because I'm a fan of comic books, I'm a fan of movies, I'm a fan of wrestling. And I met several wrestlers at Comic-Con.
Go ahead.
And if people want to tell me that wrestling doesn't belong at Comic-Con, they don't have to show up.
Right. The fandom is so similar between comic books and pro wrestling. I mean, there's almost no demarcation line in between the two, but the toxicity is off the charts. And there's a saying in the internet wrestling community: nobody hates pro wrestling more than pro wrestling fans, and that's absolutely true. That's some of the stuff that people complain about. Like the last episode of my podcast, we were talking about, people.
I listened to that earlier.
Oh, okay. We were talking, like, people will complain about storylines and something not making sense. And it's, this is the worst ever. I'm like, one, you have no basis for comparison because you've been watching for 10 years. Come back and see me when you've been watching for 30. But if you're going to, in my opinion, and this is what we talked about on the show, if you're going to breathe heavy and you're going to point fingers at a wrestling promotion about the way they're doing business, point fingers in the way that they're treating their talent, more specifically the women's wrestling. I'm huge into women's wrestling, and not just for the obvious, because they're good-looking women. I genuinely like watching women's wrestling. I always have. And I'll take a good women's wrestling match with two maybe not glamorously gorgeous-looking women over two glamorously gorgeous-looking women who can't wrestle. I'll take the wrestling match any day of the week. So when you're critique that, like as a fan, you can that wasn't booked for me, or this wrestler isn't for me. I get that, but it goes beyond that sometimes, and it's some of it's just downright ridiculous.
Yeah, and I don't know what you had a good point on your show about how the writers can come up with all these different shows, and you actually compared it to all the long-running shows on television and how many episodes WWE has compared to all these other shows. And yeah, you're right. Like you're gonna have a hit and miss episode once in a while.
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
you're not always gonna get a banger right out of like how many shows a year that they're producing.
Well, and I think I did I know which episode you're talking about, and the segment. WWE, and my math was off. I missed a show because they have the NXT UK show, which I missed. WWE produces 502 original hours of programming every year.
Yeah.
Every year. By comparison, Law and Order SVU, in the 22 years it's been on TV, has just over 500 episodes. So in 22 years, they had as many episodes as WWE does a year. To your point, it's impossible to write 502 hours worth of compelling minute-to-minute television every year. And I defy anyone to do it.
All right. Well, Kevin had said that to look him up. I'll send you the link in the private chat. Okay. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, we like Kevin. I'm a huge fan of wrestling. Period. Like I enjoy watching all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would definitely love to. One of these days, I'll have you on my show and I'll show that video.
It's all in good fun.
But no, like you're absolutely right. You can't expect to have like every episode be 100% awesome. And like especially it depends on who's also writing the episodes and who's doing what storyline. You're not going to have an awesome storyline at all points because someone's going to come up with something very cheesy. I mean, you said it in your show how long they were doing the egg bit,
yeah.
And then just to have a guy in a chicken suit to come out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. And when I listen to somebody who's 25, 30, maybe 35 years old, who's been watching WWE for maybe 20 years, maybe, and I know that sounds like a long time, but I've been watching pro wrestling since like 1981, even before. Like I was watching it before the birth of Hulkamania, so I've seen some bad wrestling programming over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And what WWE has done recently doesn't even come close to what I would consider historically bad wrestling television.
And I mean, like even in the 90s, they had their moments, and with the Attitude Era, they had their moments of really bad, gimmicks.
Yeah, there was some bad stuff in the Attitude Era, and I know there's the Attitude Era because it was such a big boom period for WWE and pro wrestling as a whole. It was a big boom period. I think sometimes it's romanticized. Mm-hmm. Like there's the legend of what it was, and then there was the reality of what it was. And a lot of these people that are still clinging on to what it was don't really know what it was. I mean, you look back historically, the women were treated horribly. They really were. And as a horny, mid-20-something-year-old, you think it's cool. As a, still horny, but somewhat more worldly 47-year-old, I can look at the stuff they did for the women in the Attitude Era and say it sucked.
As a fan of wrestling from the late 80s, early 90s, when they started doing like the bra and panty matches, and it's just like, and like the Stacy Keibler thing, like over sexualization of these women was really cringy. then, and now they're talking about it now, about how bad they feel about it. And what's her name, Lita came out with talking about her feelings on the date night skit that they did.
Right. Yeah. That was absolutely just, and I get they were going for shock value, and that was the sign of the times. There was a lot of shock TV going on. I mean, you had, what was it? Tom Green was pretty big back then. Jackass was on the rise. So there was a lot of shock TV, and you really, if you wanted to stand out, you either had to be more shocking or find a way for people to go, holy crap, they did what? And then that gets them to tune in next week. Okay, what are they going to do next week? So I get it. I get it. But at the same time, we don't need it. A lot of it didn't age very well at all. And we can produce a wrestling show devoid of all that, and it can still be a good wrestling show.
Yeah. And I can see why a lot of fans went and switched from WWE to like ECW and beyond. And like, but I mean, even Nitro was there at that point, like the over-sexualization. And
yes.
TNA.
They named the show TNA, like literally TNA, and it was, it was not so subtle as to what they were going for.
But no, like I'm glad it changed and evolved into something else now. And I mean, we're still gonna see a little bit of sexualization, but I mean, come on. For a comic book fan to complain that there's women, too much sexualization of women, and you can't, see the fact that men have muscle on top of muscle. I'm sorry. Right. It goes both ways.
That's the thing, and that's the part that gets the nuance that gets missed a lot with that is that yes, the women have been historically sexualized, and more so than sexualized, they were basically belittled to very, very minor roles and insignificant roles. The men, I would argue, have been in a less, I'm trying to think of the word, blatant way, have been sexualized. Because again, you take a guy like Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre is one, being a straight man, I'll look at you and tell you he's drop dead good looking. Like Drew McIntyre's a good looking dude. He's in great shape. He comes out there in next to nothing.
Yeah.
Like every week. And there's a large majority of their wrestlers are like that. They're in great shape. They're good looking guys. And they come out pretty much like you said, in their underwear. And there's a reason for that, and there's a reason why people that look like that end up on TV. We are a shallow society, and that's what we want to see. It's.
I mean, I became a fan of, gladiators.
Yeah.
In the 90s, and even roller derby. Like, you see shows similar to that coming out, but I mean, wrestling has always been, the modern version of gladiators.
Yeah.
Without the killing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Trish Stratus. I mean, I have the Playboy.
Yeah, we all had it at one point. Yeah, no, the stuff they were doing with her at the time was very cringe. When you look back at it now, and in this day and age, in this culture, it wouldn't fly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure there's people out there that are trying to cancel WWE, and I'm sure that with the move to Peacock, they even did their own canceling of certain episodes.
And they should have. And that's
rightfully so.
They got rid of just some segments that, quite frankly, they needed to. Wrestlers dressed. Wrestlers out there in blackface. Just stuff that's just really doesn't need to be. It needs to be locked in a vault somewhere and put away. So.
And I remember we touched on that a little bit on Reels and Heels, and actually looking that up, they made a toy of the blackface thing, and I'm just like,
oh, the Roddy Piper, yeah, they did. The Roddy Piper blackface, they certainly did. I'd forgotten that until you mentioned it, but thinking back, yeah, they did.
I'm sure that there's someone out there who has that in their collection and thought it was funny, but I just I can't imagine, seeing that in the like, I can't imagine what that was like to see for anybody.
I watched it as it happened originally, and even back then, at a time when this stuff socially wasn't at the front of the line. I even looked at it back then, going, "What are they doing? Like, what are you doing here? What is this?"
Yeah. See, I love this. In Maine, women can mow their lawns topless. I feel like they passed that law also in Ontario, so that women can choose to be topless if they so wish. Had to quit watching Yeah, you know what? I stopped watching for a while too. Yeah. I'm trying to get back into watching wrestling and a lot of their stuff, because I as a fan, I still am interested in seeing what the wrestlers are doing.
Right. It's sometimes you have to do that though. I took a break after my kids were born in 2005, and and we had twins, so we were round the clock parents. There wasn't a break. And then, trying to maintain a marriage as that would be, and, try to have a social life outside of that. I had to compartmentalize some things, and some things had to go away, and pro wrestling was one of them. Like there wasn't enough going on at the time that was must watch TV for me. And, when I was single and I was in my 20s, I had all the free time in the world, and I could watch it, 3-4 nights a week, and it wasn't a big deal. But come, after the kids were born, about 2007, I was like, I need to take a break from this. It's not doing anything for me. I wasn't really, I didn't appreciate John Cena until much towards the last probably 5-6 years of his main run. But early on, I just was not here for what John Cena was doing, and Edge and guys like that. So I was like, maybe I need to just walk away from this for a little while, and. I came back to it in late 11, early 12, when The Rock and John Cena had their big moment at WrestleMania. I was like, okay, I like The Rock. That was the other thing. The Rock had gone to Hollywood. Stone Cold had retired. Most of the guys that I really liked to watch were gone. So when The Rock came back, I was like, okay, I can tune in and watch this and see what's going on. And at that point, there were other guys there that drew me in. I'm like, okay, and then they were starting to do more with the women. There were a couple women there that I'm like, okay, I like what they're doing here. Let me stick around a little bit. And then I just, here we are, 9 years later. And I won't say that I watch it full time, because we don't have regular like cable. I have, the network, and then transferred over to Peacock. We're almost exclusively streaming here. So I haven't watched a live episode of Monday Night Raw or SmackDown in years. So I catch it secondhand, catch what I can on YouTube. But, I watch the pay-per-views regularly, and I have for years.
Okay. And when they start doing like the tours again, are you going to go and watch a live show?
Probably. We were going somewhat regularly, about 10 minutes from the house. NXT, we're part of their Florida loop. And it's $10 for a front row seat. So it's great. It's almost 3 hours worth of $10 entertainment. So we'll go, and if they come to Orlando, we've got the Amway Center over there. Those shows tend to be a little more expensive, depending on the budget. But I'll go if I feel it's safe.
I love how everybody that I know, that even those that I work with hanging with Webb, are all from Florida. Like, we have Kevin, who is from Maine, and then we have Ryan, who's a little north of that. But it's just like everybody's mostly on the East Coast. On the East Coast. And so one of these days, I will leave my little comfort of my home, and I will find a way to Florida, and I'll probably have to make a week of it just so that I can see everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot to do, a lot to see, and it sounds like you got a lot of people to catch up with down here.
Yeah. Do you go to Florida's conventions at all?
There's, what the heck's the name of it? There's a Comic-Con in Orlando that we went to once. And it was a good time. We just really never got the chance to go back, and we would definitely go again. We don't necessarily cosplay for the conventions, although my girl and I have talked about it. She does costuming. We do Renaissance festivals.
Oh,
and
okay.
We have a blast with the Renaissance festivals. We have a nice one here locally, but we've been going to those. She and I have been together about 7 years now, and we've been going almost every year since. And she's done most of the costumes for what we wear when we go.
Yeah, more promos than action to me. Yeah, I'll have to start watching more of the pay-per-view stuff because I don't really watch wrestling much anymore because of it just didn't pique my interest anymore.
Yeah.
That's a definite story that I want to hear from you, Kevin. But yes, I will definitely have to. It was funny. My husband comes up and he goes, "How would you feel about renting a trailer and going across Canada?" I'm like, "I would love that."
Yeah, that's our retirement plan. We want to get an RV and she has this whole route throughout the U.S. that she wants to take, and as long as financially we can pull it off, that's our plan.
Yeah, and I have always wanted to go and go to like different conventions across Canada and also do a convention tour around the States because I just want to experience that con culture and see what everybody else's conventions are like because we have an interesting convention lifestyle here in Winnipeg, but I feel like it's even better down in the States.
Yeah. So the Orlando one's pretty good. I was in New York during, what's the big one up there? I think it's like, I forget what they call it. It's basically the New York Comic Con. And it's like, I think between that and San Diego, those are the two big ones.
Yeah.
And I was so busy getting myself established up there because I moved up in June and I think the con is either late September, early October. So I was really just kind of getting my bearings. I didn't want to just travel out and go, jump right into a huge convention. But the following year before I left, I had worked it out. There was a comic book shop in like the Midtown area that I used to go to. And I was looking for a side job and I asked them, I was like, "Hey, you guys got any side work, here that I could just come in and work the comic book shop on the weekends? I know enough about comics to sell a comic book to a kid." And he said, "Well, we're not really hiring these, but I'll tell you what we're doing." He's like, "We got a booth. We're going to be working the Comic-Con." And he's like, basically, here was the deal. We'll pay you in-store credit, what it would be per hour. And then when you're done working, you just get to free run to, go run the Comic-Con. And I gave him my name, my contact information. I was like, when that time comes, definitely give me a call. And then I ended up moving back to Florida anyway. So it ended up being a wash. But yeah, no, it was something I was looking forward to.
Yeah. Would you ever go back to the wrestling lifestyle?
It's something that I've thought about. Probably not as a wrestler per se, just because I'm too damn old. I'm too damn old and I'm too damn broken. But there is a guy locally who runs a wrestling school and a wrestling promotion, and he wouldn't remember me, but I worked with him on a few shows back in the day, and if I could probably drop a couple of names and say, "Hey, this guy trained me, and I knew this guy," and he'd go, "Oh yeah, you," and I could probably get back in that way. My daughter has expressed an interest in doing it, and if anybody in our immediate area was going to train her, he'd be the guy because he worked for WWF back in the day. I know him. I trust him. I know that he's not just going to, be unsafe with her. So I've thought about it, but again, it's finding the time. I'm extremely busy with work, with raising a kid, trying to maintain my relationship and, not fall back into the same pitfalls that I did, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
It's carving out that time to do it.
Yeah. And I know by all means plug your show because I listened to it today and I definitely want to continue listening to it.
It's the Mindless Musings podcast, which is a horrible name. I'm horrible at coming up with names. And originally it was not supposed to be a wrestling centric podcast. It was like, I was pretty much just going to be a podcast of what I used to do on YouTube, just get up and talk about stuff. And that burn out pretty quickly, because when you're doing a podcast, it's very difficult to do anything more than about 10, 15 minutes on your own. So I met up with a couple of guys on Twitter, and, we got to talking. We got in a Discord chat. I invited the one guy up on my show, and he and I hit it off really well. Rob from Rob the Genius, he and I hit it off, and it just became this 2-man thing. And then we added Jason, and it's been, the three of us really have good chemistry. So it's been primarily wrestling. Like I said, we did talk about the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, but it is the Mindless Musings podcast. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Apple Podcast. The home for it is an app I use called Anchor. The website is anchor.fm. And you can look me up there. But again, it's available on like 6 or 8 different platforms.
Okay. It's such a pleasure to talk to you regularly on social media, and to actually put a voice to all the funny comments. I love this. I love hanging out with you, dude. I miss
awesome.
this.
This really feels like the BlogTV days. It really does.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like, clearly we haven't really skipped a beat much, but
just jumped right back in. This has been great. This has been awesome. I appreciate the hell out of you for having me up here. And
no worries. And you're always welcome to come back and hang out with us. And so, where can we find you on social media?
Twitter. Hang on, I changed my Twitter handle recently. I got to remember what it is. It's associated with the podcast now. Hang on. I'm terrible at this. I am like the worst social media presence known to man. This is why I can't get anywhere, because I suck at this stuff. It's okay. Basically, the easiest way to get a hold of me on Twitter is at @TheMindlessPod.
Okay.
And really, that's about it. I don't have much of a presence on. I have a Facebook page for the Mindless Musings podcast, but I haven't done much with it yet. As I get further along with that, I'll give you that. But right now, that's almost not even a thing.
But yeah, no, it's such a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to more comments and more sharing of life experiences in the future.
Absolutely, like I said, the last 10 years, it feels like I haven't even chipped the iceberg. It feels like a lifetime has passed in 10 years. Since we last talked.
It's crazy. Like, I know BlogTV hasn't been around for at least almost 10 years, if not longer. But it was sad to see it go. But I'm glad that we have the ability to stream on Facebook and even Twitter now.
It paved the way for what we're doing now.
Yeah. And I'm glad to see that you're continuing with your podcasting.
I appreciate that, and I'm glad to see you out here doing your thing as well.
Thank you.
All right.
So you have a great night, and everybody, thank you for tuning in.
All right. Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate that. Have a good night, okay?
You too. Take care.
Bye.